this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. Some of my fondest memories, I think, probably were, as a young man, were going to a golf course. And it wasn't just any golf course. It was a golf course that sat right in the center of uptown New Orleans. And it's what's referred to as an executive golf course. And essentially what that means is that instead of a standard par 72 course, this course was either a 68 or a 69 par. And what that means is that the holes were shorter and that this was actually a walkable course. It was, as I found out later, it was a great course for an old guy, which back then, of course, I was young, but I was just learning golf. And so I could just go around this thing as many times as I wanted to, hitting the ball in the hot South Louisiana sun, trying to avoid water, which, there's no hills down there. So they put water all over the place. I had what were called hydrophilic balls. They seemed to find the water all the time. But, I had a lot of peace out there. And the reason is that it wasn't just the time that I spent walking around the Audubon Park golf course. It was the people I met. It was like back then, the World War II veterans that were still around. I played golf with a guy who only had one arm, had lost an arm in the European theater, and was one of the best ball strikers I'd ever been around. Couldn't hit it far, but it was always down the middle. And of course, he had a good story to go along with it. But the person that influenced me the most was a golf pro who was at the end of his career. And this man would give me pointers without me ever paying for a lesson, though I had offered. He just wanted to chat. The golf pros many times are that way. Today, we're going to talk about a case that happened all the way back in 1986. The reason we're talking about this is that finally, after all this time, this case has in fact been resolved. And the person that is the victim in this case was a beloved golf course pro by the name of Sarah Hunter. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. People say, certain people say, well, it's not a real sport. Of course it is. It's a real sport. And at Audubon, I never took a cart. I never took an electric cart. I walked everywhere I went. And it was
is not golf when you're riding. Golf is golf when you walk. That's when you're
thinking about it. You're thinking about each shot.
Yes.
And how to form a shot. Noah played in high school, and I used to tell him when they go play against other teams. I don't know how valid this is, but I would say you're not playing against the other team. You're playing against the course.
Oh yeah.
And and how do you understand the course? How do you read it? And it takes. And I'm certainly no golf guru, but it truly takes a good golf coach, a pro, to teach young people how to do this. And in this particular case today, Sarah, who I mentioned just a moment ago, seems to have been that kind of person.
Sarah was cool, man. She really was. I was looking at some of her background. She was from Florida and was now at the Manchester Country Club and is the golf pro there. At a certain age, you're a great golfer, amongst average golfers, but there's that next level of pro golf, when you get on the tour. And even that, there's 5 different layers of that.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's the golf pro. A golf pro is somebody who is really good at the game and can teach the game. And that's not something every great golfer can do. But Sarah was, you mentioned at the very beginning, a beloved golf pro. She was. People really thought a lot of her. And I was looking back, 'cause she didn't show up for work. September 19th, 1986. It's a little after 8 a.m. Sarah is always there on time, ready to teach, ready to golf, ready to do what they do.
Now, this is in Vermont, right?
Yeah.
A state I've always wanted to go to, by the way. I just have to interject that. I've never been to Vermont or New Hampshire. So all of our friends out there, howdy. If you're up in Vermont, New Hampshire, one of my dream destinations in the U.S.
And this is at the Manchester Country Club. And so, it's how many of our stories do we start with the welfare check? And that's what this was. Hey, she didn't show up. She normally does. The guy she actually was renting a room at a boarding house. She did have a boyfriend. And so, you know how cops are immediately. Who are the first people that are going to get looked at? the spouse, significant other, and in this case, the boyfriend. And they were able to clear him right away. She was at his house the night before, left about 10 o'clock, stopped and this is why I say she's such a cool girl. She stopped by and got a 6-pack of Coors on the way to her house, to her home. And the police go there and they find half a can of beer inside the boarding room, and the other 5 cans are in her car. And that's it. She's nowhere to be found. And as you follow this further and further and further, it is her murder that goes unsolved for decades, that the person that eventually cops to it, which is the reason we're doing this today, this cold case, he was on the radar from day one, Joe. Think about that for a minute. You know, we had the show the other day where a guy he'd been a one-off. He killed the young man up in Shasta, and he does that in 84, and then he doesn't kill. He doesn't do anything. He moves away
off the radar.
Yeah, doesn't commit another crime, and that's not the case with this guy. This guy was in the crosshairs within 48 hours, pretty much, of what happened with Sarah. So she's kidnapped, and she was taken by force. Now, I really hate saying fascinating when we do these, because I think of family members and I'm like, I wouldn't want somebody to talk about somebody I loved and who was killed in a horrible way to call it fascinating.
No, but listen, you got to receive a special dispensation for this. Okay. You cannot just simply, you cannot say that you hate to say it, because it's a descriptor. I mean, we talk about some of the most horrible things in the world, Dave. And this case in particular is horrific in the sense that she's minding her own.
Right.
And you're thinking about this location up in, when I think of Vermont, I think, kind of this beautiful kind of placid place. You think about this particular area of Vermont, I think about lush green rolling hills, and, kind of standoffish but friendly people, New Englanders, and she's just going about her life, man.
I always think of the Vermont teddy bear that's on back order for my wife,
Yeah, there you go.
The card you give her on Valentine's Day.
Yep, absolutely. You remember they used to have those ads. That was Limbaugh that had those ads on his show for years.
I actually had them on my show for a number of years.
No kidding.
Yeah, really? That and Harry's, the shavers,
you think about that environment up there, and it just goes to show you, which is something we've emphasized many times, Dave, over the years, that horror can visit you at any location. It doesn't matter if it's some bucolic location. And this is one of those cases, Dave, I have to say, I'm glad that you brought up the boyfriend that she had, because this is a case where this was not somebody within the intimate circle. I'll go ahead and say that up front. Right. This is a case involving literally a stranger that kind of steps out from the shadows, Dave.
Yeah, and steps out working at a gas station. We only know what happened in a couple of different cases, because this guy, he ends up in California in prison for a number of kidnappings and sexual assaults that are all done pretty much the same way. And so here we have Morrison, who has gotten away with this murder, but he's in prison. He's been in prison for most of his life, and he's going to be there the rest of his life now. But to go back to this story, the nuts and bolts is that Sarah goes to a gas station and gets kidnapped, tied up, thrown into a trunk of a car, driven out, and then is killed.
Yeah.
The manner, the way this killing happened is something out of a horror movie, though, Joe.
Yeah, it really is.
This is not something I've ever actually heard of. I've seen it played out in movies where people grab something off of a desk.
Yeah.
But come on, man. I didn't know this was a real thing.
Yeah, and it is horrific. And again, when I talk about the weapon that was utilized in this case, I think that we learn a lot about the killer. You've heard me talk many times, Dave, about this idea of weapons of convenience. Those things, you just think about, have you ever had a circumstance, I don't know, maybe your imagination is running wild. What do I have in my house that I could use to defend myself with?
Right.
You look around, you think about what has utility in here. The reality is that there are many things around a home, in your desk, in your office, certainly in your kitchen, that have the potential for lethality. When I tell you, my friends, what was utilized to end this poor woman's life, it's going to completely change your view of this item for the rest of your life. Brother Dave, as you well know, our semester just ended at Jacksonville State University. And this was the first semester where I had human remains that I utilized as a point of instruction for my medical legal death class that I teach. And it has gone swimmingly. I'm not going to say I had all A's in the class, but it was pretty close to it. I mean, I was amazed. And I think that some of that linkage has to do with the hands-on experience that my kids had, that they were offered. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that because it was me doing the dissection, okay, and the kids would gather around our cadaver that we had, and they would hold the organs. I would allow them to assist in the dissection of individual organs. We did everything over a 12-week period, essentially, and took our time. But one of the things that was really striking to this class was the fact that I took the skull cap off of our cadaver, which is referred to as the calvarium, and removed the brain. And the brain is fascinating in and of itself, when you're taking a look at it, and particularly if you've never seen one or certainly held one in your hands, you can imagine the shock, I think, and the fascination that these kids had when they first got to hold a human brain. But what's even more compelling for them from a trauma standpoint, Dave, is they got to see the interior of the skull. And the beauty of the interior of a skull is that you can appreciate the thickness of a skull or the lack thereof. As a matter of fact, let me tell you this. I don't think I've mentioned this. To demonstrate how thin the skull is with these students, I had them all stand, I think it was to the left side of the skull. I stood on the right side, and I had a flashlight. And I put it into the cranial vault, and I turned the flashlight on and pressed it against the interior table of the temporal bone, okay? And what do they tell you about the temporal bone? That it is the temporal area of the skull is the most fragile, right? We've heard that for years and years. Dave, did you know that when you take a light and put it on the inside of the skull, it'll almost perfectly shine through. It'll luminesce on the outside. Like if we had done this in a dark room, okay, there would have been a directed light. It would not have blown it that much. You could actually pick up on detail. And on the other side of the skull in the room, it would have illuminated a chair, a table, or anything else that was over there. That's how thin the skull is. The reason this is significant is that in Sarah's case, this perpetrator, remember we talked about weapons of opportunity. This perpetrator actually took a pair of scissors, Dave. A pair of scissors, man. And from what we understand, after this, how long did you say this whole event essentially took place over? It was only a very short period of time. What?
No, actually, okay. The kid, this is an 80s kidnap murder case. this man that we're talking about, Morrison, he actually pleaded guilty to an 81 kidnapping, and that's the one that lasted about 20 minutes. This murder of our golfer, of Hunter, was hours. She came into the, one thing that's kind of interesting here, I want to point this out very, very quickly. Morrison's working at a Citgo gas station. Remember when they had gas stations that had garages?
Oh, yeah.
Where they did work?
Very well.
That's what this was. He had a rag. The killer here has a rag that he wipes windshields with. This was a full service gas station back then. And when she comes in to buy a pack of smokes, okay, remember how she'd gone and got a 6-pack of beer on her way home?
Yeah.
Well, she ran back out to get cigarettes because they found half the can of beer in her room, and her car was found at a Citgo gas station. What had happened is when she went in there to get cigarettes, Morrison says he still doesn't know why he didn't plan it out. He just did it. And he got control of her somehow. He doesn't go into great detail about how he gained control. One has to assume he took her by surprise, hit her with something, and then tied her up and gagged her with this rag he uses for wiping windshields and stuff, and keeps her in the garage area, keeps her quiet in the garage area until he finishes his shift.
Holy smokes.
Until he finishes his shift. Now,
see, I got confused, forgive me, because he had actually, as it turns out, he had actually committed another kidnapping back in 81, had he not, of like a 15 or 16-year-old girl?
And that's why these two are mixed together right now, because he's in California in prison. And the cases that we're talking about, the murder here happened in 86.
Right.
The kidnapping was in 81. They were unsolved crimes until police finally sit down. Morrison was always a suspect in the murder of Sarah. But the thing is, her body wasn't found right away. This is a really confusing case. And it wasn't until all these decades go by, they're sitting down with this guy in prison. And they're like, okay, man, you're going to have to give us the story. He's in prison for the rest of his life. Okay. He ain't going anywhere. And they go and talk to him one day, and he gives them part of the story. And he then stops. They're pushing, how did you kill her? Because her body was so degraded by the time they found her, they couldn't tell her actual, how did he kill her? And they thought she had been strangled. The police did. That was what they were trying to go with. Did you strangle her? He goes, no, I didn't strangle her. And that's where we find out about the scissors. He actually was able to, and this is what gets me. You got your average 32-year-old golf pro, okay? A woman who's just living life, man. Think about living the dream.
Yeah.
Goes into a gas station, buys some cigarettes. And this guy ties her up until he can finish his shift, throws her into the trunk of his car, and then drives. And when he opens the trunk, that's when he doesn't know what else to do. You know, it was all spur of the moment. But he gagged her with a rag he used to wipe windshields. And when they said, we got to know how she died. And that's when he said, he opened up the trunk. He didn't know what else to do. So it was a spur of the moment decision to kill her. Had a pair of scissors. And he crammed them in her ear to scramble her brain.
Wow.
He said, I knew that would kill her.
Yeah, and he's right. He was. It
sounds like Shawshank.
Yeah, it does. It does. It sounds like a lot of these cases where you have somebody that will use will make do with whatever utility that they have. And listen, scissors, I got to tell you, they would be a weapon I would probably choose, particularly an older pair of scissors, if you were just trying to defend yourself. Because whether you open them up or not, and I've had cases, Dave, where I've had people that were stabbed with open scissors, and what I mean by that is where they're spread apart,
right?
And that creates a problem if you're trying to interpret. I had one case in particular where had a person that was stabbed multiple times with open scissors. Now, just think about how complex that is, because you're giving the impression, and I'll never forget this. This person was stabbed over the surface of their chest and their abdomen and their shoulder. So you've got multiple sharp force stab wounds with, that it's a single-edged weapon, but yet these two, you'll have them side by side and they will be mirrors of one another. Okay? Because if you think about a stab wound itself, I always say that it looks like a winking eye. You'll have a kind of a rounder portion that's like, if you imagine the rounder area of your eye that is adjacent to your nose, and then kind of the sharp edge that's on the outside. But yet, just imagine having that kind of manifestation, and it's over and over and over again. But he's saying that if he utilized the scissors in order to kill her, and of course he understands, as he had stated, that he wanted to scramble her brain. When you think about that, I wonder if he kept the scissors closed, because that injury looks completely different. And it also kind of strengthens the scissors as a weapon, because now you've got these two communicating blades that are now together. It makes it much more robust. Anatomically, with the ear, you have, for people that don't know what your ear hole is referred to as, you have what's referred to as the external auditory meatus, which is the hole that you can see that's visible, externally. Remember the old saying, when we were kids, they say, don't stick anything in your ear larger than your elbow. Have you heard that? Here I am sticking paper clips in there and everything else.
That's the thing. Old guys used to use their keys.
Yeah, they used to use their keys and any number of things, to clear their ears. And then, the thing about it with the auditory meatus, you have the internal. So it literally goes in toward the skull, Dave, anatomically, and then all of a sudden it takes a dive. It just goes like that, almost straight down. What I'm thinking is that if he drove this through her skull, he has to penetrate that area, probably inferior. Remember, I was talking about how thin the skull is in the temporal area, and you're down into the area where you have what's referred to, if people will just go behind your ear right now, and you'll feel there's a knot right behind your ear, and that's called a mastoid, and it's rather robust. It's kind of a point back here on both sides. It's bilateral. You can feel it. It's kind of this little hump. You have another little hump on the back of your head that's called the occipital protuberance. It's also a little bump on your skull that you can feel externally. It would have taken some level of force to have done this. Can you imagine her horror, Dave? She's gagged. She's bound. He's placed her in the trunk. And I'm thinking, to what end are you doing this? Because is it, there's multiple motivations, in my estimation, at least, for kidnapping, right? I think the classic thing is, well, you're going to drop the money at such and such, and we're going to get money for you. And then, of course, the other extreme of this is you have some kind of psychosexual motivation. You can have extreme anger too. Like, let's just say you've got some guy out there that's had his heart broken by some gal. If I can't have you, no one will have you. They go and snatch them. And I guess you could say it's kind of psychosexual, but it's more for the purpose of terrorizing somebody. And of course, those can end up fatally as well. But in this case, I find it fascinating that he would have taken this pair of scissors. And, the thing about it is, Dave, he's working in a garage. You realize how many implements there are in a garage that you could have chosen, and you chose a pair of scissors?
Let me tell you why. And it actually makes sense. I've been digging through this because I'm fascinated by people who can live with something they've done this heinous. And Morrison has said that it truly weighed on him. He claims this is the only murder he committed. He has committed plenty of assaults, kidnappings, things like that. He's a horrible guy. He's not saying he's a good guy. He's just saying this is his only murder. And he said he told those who came to interview him that it really had weighed on him over time. He said, you don't get away from it. You think about it all the time. But he said that it was spur of the moment. He mentions this several times over 3 days of interviews. It was just spur of the moment. I didn't plan it out. And he said that he didn't know why he did it, but he was planning to sexually assault her. But every time, because he has her in the garage, she's tied up, she's gagged with the windshield wipers, rag. And every time he would get ready to go back there, here comes some other customer wanting gas. And he said he kept getting interrupted. That's why he didn't sexually assault her. And then by then, his shift is over. He's got this 32-year-old woman that he's had tied up for a while now. Well, he can't just let her go. So that's when he takes her in the trunk of the car and boom, off. So when we look at it and think scissors, he did have so many other things. Well, his intent was not to kill her in that place. His intent was to sexually assault her. And there he had plenty of tools if he wanted to kill her. Could have killed her at the gas station. He had plenty of, certainly opportunity. He kept her tied up. Didn't get caught there with her tied up. He had opportunity to kill her if that was his original plan, and certainly had better equipment to kill with than a pair of scissors.
Yeah. And that goes to, you begin to think about this, and I use this term a lot. I've found myself using a lot more now, the idea of menacing someone. There's an old Betty Davis movie. I don't know if it was Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte or if it whatever happened to Baby Jane. And there's a pair of scissors that are utilized in that movie. And for me, when I was growing up and I would watch these old black and white horror movies, there was nothing that was more chilling than an image of scissors being utilized in order to bring about someone's death. What a horrific way to die. But in the end, we've got someone that has now been found out, even by his own admission. We think about this beautiful countryside, Dave. You had alluded to Shawshank a few moments ago, and of course that was set in Maine, and the environment is not too different, I think, in the countryside. Certainly, I used the term bucolic earlier. I just it makes me sound smart when I say it. I don't know if I actually know the meaning. But anyway, yeah.
I do have a question for you about some of this, though,
quite
Joe.
Lovely. But yeah, where was she found, and what was the status?
That's why when they were talking to Morrison, you're talking to a convicted criminal. You're talking to somebody who, by their very nature, for their entire life, they've lied, cheat, stolen, whatever. So I don't know how much stock you put in what a criminal is confessing to. I don't know. I'm not a cop. But at some point, they have to vet everything. They got to verify everything. I know that. But one of the things that he kept saying in his interview is that it wasn't planned out. It happened. It was spur of the moment. And when he was challenged on this, that when Hunter was found, when her body was finally found, she was grasping a branch or a stick with her left hand. Her pants and underwear had been taken off, and one of her socks was on the fence. And what Morrison claimed is that he says he killed Hunter in that trunk of his car with the scissors, jammed them in her ear to kill her. And he thought she was dead. She didn't make any motion, and he believed she was dead. And he took her out of the car and took her and laid her by the stone wall. And he said he doesn't remember anything moving, not her hands, not her legs, not breathing, nothing. He said that he thought he killed her in the trunk and then moved her body near the brick wall. And there was nothing, he said, there was nothing to lead him to believe she was still alive. And yet there's apparent movement with her body after she's laid by the brick wall, Joe.
Yeah, the dead don't undress themselves.
Yeah.
And again, I love that you pointed out this idea, where, deception is normalized, I think, with a lot of folks that are institutionalized. There's another term from Shawshank, when Morgan Freeman's character actually says, I'm institutionalized now. I couldn't make it on the outside. It's a way of life, I think. because and give me those items again. Her underwear is down. Yeah, obviously her shorts, her underwear is down. The
Her
dead
left
don't
hand.
just sit their clothing just does not spontaneously fall off. All right, and there's a sock over the fence.
And her hand. It said that she was found grasping a branch or a stick with her left hand. Underwear and pants had been taken off, and one of her socks was on the fence, the brick wall.
Yeah, there's a couple of things working here. First off, let me address this idea of her grasping something. You know, Dave, there is a term that I absolutely it makes my skin crawl every time I hear it. That's used in forensic science, and it's called a cadaveric spasm, and it's associated with drowning. We'll get drowned people that have drowned many times out of bodies of water, or they're found washed up and they'll be clutching things in their hands. And some people will say, well, this is as a result of the body spasming underwater, and they wind up with debris in their hands. Okay. I hate that term because it's illogical. It's saying a cadaveric spasm. Cadavers cannot spasm. Okay. Mm-hmm. I think that it's for people might be fighting for their lives, to try to, and they're crawling up in branches and all those sorts of things. But I think that that's evidence of, I don't know if I'm buying what he's selling here, because how can her hand grasp something in death unless he placed it in her hand, which is kind of odd. Maybe, just maybe, the status that she was in, she was fighting for her life. I think that there is a possibility, and no one's ever going to know. But if her clothing is disheveled to this extent, I think that there's a possibility that there was a sexual assault that took place out there. She's fighting for her life. She's grabbed hold of the ground. Maybe she felt a branch there, something that she could knock him off with, or maybe she was in such intense pain and she was fearful in those last moments of her life. She may have been, in addition to that, he's got this rag stuffed in her mouth. Now that in and of itself, if you get it far enough back in the throat, people can die from that because the airway is blocked at that point in time. But this sounds like she was in fact fighting for her life, unless he had some kind of weird, necrophile streak in him, where he wanted to have her undressed before him. And I'm not going to go down that dark road very far, but, evidence would essentially suggest something else here. Then, he opened up the trunk and he didn't know what to do with her, or he thought she was already dead or something like that. I'm just not buying it. I think at the end of the day, when I'm hearing all this, I'm thinking, dude, if you've opened the door and you're confessing to this, why not just tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth? I mean, again, that it's California. They're not, well, this case is out of Vermont. That you're not going to get on death row. It's just, it happened, and you want to completely clear your conscience or whatever. Why not just tell the truth? This evidence that we're mentioning here just seems like it doesn't line up. It doesn't line up with what he's saying, Dave.
Not when he's saying that the sole purpose of him, when he, at a spur of the moment, decided to abduct her, and hold her against her will, tie her up, was to sexually assault her, and tells them that, every time he thought he had an opportunity to sexually assault her at the gas station, somebody would drive up to get to the gas pumps. So now he's off work. He's got her by himself. She's still tied up in the trunk of his car. So, yeah, it stands to reason that he would have done what he actually set out to do back at the gas station, right?
Yeah, it truly does. And I've got there's something else to this as well, Dave, because back in 1981, David Allen Morrison actually, he had admitted, in addition to, having killed Sarah, he had admitted that he kidnapped a 15-year-old. By the name of Laura Sheridan. And this is out of Lanesboro, Massachusetts. And, if he is admitting to that, we know that he counts Sarah Hunter as one of his victims. He bounces out of there not too long after Sarah Hunter's disappearance and death, he's headed for Cali at that point in time. Dave,
Yep.
I got to ask a big question here. Are there others? That's because that's when I begin to think about this, if you'll do this twice in that particular area, you want to be shed of these crimes or put them behind you. You wind up in California, and all of that distance. How did he make his way out there? Did he go on a killing spree? Are there other bodies out there that are in some lonely, desolate area? And I always think, going back to this idea of you always have to take everything with a grain of salt. Well, are there other bodies out there that he could potentially roll over on just so that maybe he can leverage this in some way? He knows he's going to be in jail for the rest of his life at this point. Are there other bodies out there where he can say, well, if you guys want to know about this, I'll be glad to tell you, but this is what I expect in return. We saw this with Otis Toole.
Oh my
Otis
God.
Toole, took people all over the country, to get free trips out of him. Of course, most of those he didn't commit any the numbers that him and Henry Lee Lucas, allegedly were attached to.
Do you think Otis Toole got Adam?
Oh boy, that's a good question.
I'm sorry.
know.
I apologize because I didn't ask you about that ahead of time. I'm sorry. And you know what? I'm going to save that for another episode.
No, I've got another great Otis Toole story that I can tell, because he did wind up in New Orleans while I was down there to come out and visit a spot that he said he dumped a body in. All right. So he's quite the character, but there's a line here, I think, a thread, if you will, that when you got a lot of time on your hands, when there's nothing else left to do except wait on death, you want to engage with somebody. I guess you have to be grateful for small blessings. And for those that remain that were related or are related to Sarah Hunter, this 32-year-old that died back in 1986, I hope that there is some satisfaction in the idea that this individual finally admitted to this. There is no such thing as closure. The horror still exists. But now, at least in her case, we do have answers. We're going to be following this case as things develop. You never know. You never know what the police are going to shake out with this guy. Maybe he's going to roll over on other cases, and maybe he'll add clarity to other things that he's been involved in over the years. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bag.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.